last but not least, I am very pleased to welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads, good friend Roshini Rajkumar, strategic communication and crisis coach to C-suite executives. She hosts Real Talk with Roshini on WCCO Radio in Minnesota and Real Leaders with Roshini podcast, which can be found on your favorite podcast app. Roshini is a licensed attorney and former TV reporter called upon by media across the U.S., including yours truly, now going back, I think, 6 years, to talk about leadership, crisis management, political strategy, PR blunders in sports and entertainment. And her book is Communicate That, which is now in its 3rd edition and has been read by thousands across the U.S., Canada, and Asia. Her website is ownyourwow.com. Roshini Rajkumar, welcome back to Jimmy at the Crossroads.
It's great to be back with you, Jimmy, and lots that you are getting into. I love how you dive into these topics from many directions.
You know, that's one thing I think is important, especially when we're talking about a crisis like this. There are a lot of different angles to it, and there are a lot of different angles when it comes to politics and economics in general. So my view is to zero in on just one narrow band. I'll let others do that. We should be talking about the diversity of things that impact one another.
Right. There are a lot of different angles. There are also a lot of different emotions, in both of our lifetime, and many people, even way older than we are, never experienced something like what we are going through right now as a nation. So it does mean that different kinds of industries have to come together, different disciplines have to come together and figure out a way to come up with solutions.
Speaking of coming together, Roshini, this Sunday is Easter Sunday. Today is Good Friday. Happy Good Friday and happy Easter to you.
You
There
too.
are a lot of people across the country, millions upon millions of Americans across the country, who would normally be gathering with their families, coming together to go to Easter services, and that's not something that can happen, at least in most of the country. You talk about coming together. Unfortunately, this pandemic is getting in the way of families being able to come together on the day that is, for Christians, the single most important day of the year.
It really is. And, this whole Easter season, I'm also a Catholic. It just hasn't felt like Lent, because I can't go to Mass every Sunday, every weekend. I can't do some of the things like tonight. Normally, we'd be going to some sort of a Good Friday Mass with the family. Sunday, same thing. We would do that on Easter Sunday and then gather probably in a large group to eat and just celebrate. So it really does change up a lot of dynamics, and it takes away from things changing, right? We're really living in a space right now where every day, if we let it, could just be like Groundhog's Day. And we need to not let that happen. And so it's a combination of your own mindset. What are you doing to keep yourself invigorated? What are you doing to keep yourself calm? And how are you taking those attitudes and those feelings to your family if you have a significant other or kids or parents for that matter? We have to really look at what's happening with the older population. I have a 90-year-old father-in-law. We cannot go to his assisted living complex. We can't go inside. So this afternoon, my husband and I are going to go and watch Jeopardy with him through the window on the phone. So that is
good
how
for
we'll
you.
connect. Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes you sad, but at least we
Agreed.
can do that.
I think that's fantastic. And for us, I mean, we're pretty much the only members of our family here in Colorado. I got a couple cousins who live up in Fort Collins, but basically it's just the 5 of us, my parents, brother, sister, and I, and we would always go to 11 o'clock Mass on Sunday, and then we'd go home and we would take pictures. I'm the one who always likes to dress up with a suit and tie. My dad will dress up with no tie, but looking dapper, and sister, mother looking great, brother dressed. And so we have these traditions in that regard. We'll come back, we'll take pictures in our outfits, what we're wearing for the day and everything. And then finally we could take them off, and then just relax and enjoy each other's company. And I don't know how Sunday is going to go, what's going to happen with that, but the bottom line is that things are very different. And so big question that I think a lot of Americans are asking themselves, probably most if not all Americans, how do we deal with this temporary reality that we're living in. How do we manage through it to be able to stay connected with others, with our family, with our friends? You found a very creative way to do it with the Jeopardy game, important member of your family to visit. What do you think Americans should be keeping in mind this holiday in that regard?
Still try to find those things that are special for you. So I will be broadcasting my radio show this Sunday from 12 to 3 Central Time, broadcasting right here from the home office, home studio, and my studio coordinator will be back at the station. But it's important, and I want to remind my listeners on Sunday of this too. It's important that we don't think we need to take away from some of the traditions. So if you use the fine china at those special meals, even if your gathering is smaller this year, still pull out the fine china. It's still a holiday. It's still a celebration. Maybe for those people that aren't going to be able to be with you, maybe you put a picture of them at their spot at the table so you can still sort of look at them, talk to them, and feel like they're with you. So what are the things you can do to still make Easter weekend, Easter Sunday, for some people it's Passover? What are some things you can do to still be with your own traditions and not feel like you have to completely overlook them because we are living in a very crazy time right now?
Roshini Rajkumar, our guest, strategic communication and crisis coach, joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. Let's just shift gears to another tradition that has been significant in the United States for a few centuries now, and that is the handshake. You and I talked about this last Saturday night on my 710 KNUS Denver radio show, and then I wrote a column for Colorado Politics, where I'm a columnist here in Colorado, where I'm broadcasting from, about this exact issue. The title of that piece was "Let's All Shake on It After It's No Longer a Crime in Colorado," because in Colorado, it is a crime right now to shake hands, which is, I think, a ridiculous absurdity.
That is
but
ridiculous. I
yeah.
cannot believe it.
Nevertheless, it is the case. Now, Dr. Fauci, and I want to play this clip we have on Cut 6 where he was asked a follow-up about this. But Dr. Fauci on Wednesday, interestingly enough, said that in an interview with Wall Street Journal podcast that he thinks we shouldn't shake hands ever again. Now, this echoes sentiments expressed a few times in the past few weeks by President Trump, which is what prompted my piece on Sunday and my decision to talk about this on Saturday's show and now here again, because I'm a big believer in the significance of the handshake. I talked about it earlier in this show. But here's Dr. Fauci being asked about it in a follow-up way on CBS's This Morning yesterday.
No, I did it almost a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but not really. There was a bit of reality to that. What I really meant is that we really now need to be aware of, because it has hit us smack in the face, that respiratory infections, particularly brand new, ominous respiratory infections like we're going through right now, are clearly spread very much not only by droplets, but by people touching their face, shaking hands. And that's the reason why we talk about washing hands so often. I don't think in reality that we're going to all of a sudden never again shake hands. But I think I threw that out there to get people to start thinking much more about personal hygiene and the way that impacts the spread of a really deadly infection like we're going through right now.
So thankfully, Dr. Fauci sort of backpedaling or saying, yeah, I don't think this is really realistic, that this likely is to happen. But I learned about the value of, and especially how to do a good handshake when I was a kid from my dad. And then I put that to use starting at the ripe old age of 13 when I first got involved in politics in Colorado, and really started to learn how significant a handshake can be in telling how a person is in social interactions, the firmness of their handshake as opposed to a fish, as my dad would call it. Also, when it comes to looking someone in the eye, you can tell a lot about a person by how they look at you in the eye or how they don't look at you in the eye during a handshake. When you're doing job interviews, research shows that you're more likely to get a job if you have a good handshake than if you don't. And then also an interesting paper, 2012, for the Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience, authors concluded that, quote, a handshake preceding a social interaction enhanced the positive impact of approach and diminish the negative impact of avoidance behavior on the evolution of social interaction, which is a very fascinating conclusion from this paper. And of course, let's just shake on it, and then I trust that you will abide by your word. So, Roshini Rajkumar, what do you make of the handshake in this discussion? Maybe we should get rid of it after the pandemic has passed.
I completely disagree with Dr. Fauci. I know Fauci's having really his moment right now. What I wish he would have said is, folks, this is our opportunity to learn and be better at our own personal hygiene. So the headline I would have preferred would be something like, you got to wash your hands more, right? Before you go to events, after you've been around a lot of people, or even right away, not long after the handshake. So if we could just teach all levels of people better personal hygiene, that is the better health message that I wish could come out of this. When Dr. Fauci is he's got such a platform right now, not the kill the handshake. The handshake is just, it's going to be a perennial symbolic gesture that brings so many people together and cuts through a lot of different boundaries and lines. And as you pointed out, you do a quick assessment of someone with their eyes, with their body language, just through that ability to shake their hand.
Yeah, I've learned that. I learned that value, as I said, as a teenager just getting involved in politics. Thankfully, my dad taught me how to do it, what not to do in a handshake. And I've gotten compliments from people on it in the past, which I think, especially when I was younger, which is pretty formative because it helps you to be better when you're going out into the professional world. I agree with you. The hygiene aspect, that's what's been so striking to me about all the shortages at stores. Is it's like, did people suddenly realize that you should wash your hands even going after going to the restroom? Because
I know. People are disgusting sometimes, Jimmy. Haven't you been in even private bathrooms, like when you're in buildings of not like out in the big public, but maybe a business building, and you're in a bathroom, you're in a restroom, different strangers, and you almost go overboard to make sure people know you're washing your own hands. And when I see people walking out of restaurant bathrooms or business building bathrooms without washing their hands, it just grosses me out. So hopefully this whole pandemic will let all of us take a look at our personal hygiene habits. We will eventually go back to flying on airplanes. Let's be a little more hygienic on airplanes. Let's clean up after ourselves. Let's clean up after our kids. All of these things could be some lessons that I want to see on the other side, but I will never want to see the death of the handshake.
me neither. Roshini Rajkumar, guest here on Jimmy at the Crossroads, host of Real Talk with Roshini on WCCO Radio in Minnesota and the Real Leaders with Roshini podcast. Roshini, let's shift over to specifically your strategic communication and crisis coach hat. I mean, you've talked and trained and helped a lot of executives work through crisis situations. And I'm wondering how you think now the Trump administration, and President Trump in particular, have been handling the messaging of all this. Because now we're seeing every day for weeks, the President of the United States has been holding these coronavirus press briefings, and there are some in the media who think that the media should no longer cover these briefings at all. What do you make of how he's messaging it, and then also the idea of not carrying briefings of the President of the United States?
What we do know about President Donald Trump is that he comes from kind of part of his world is the TV world. He likes being on stage. And when he gets his message to where he feels comfortable with it, he loves that. And he can't do rallies anymore. So this kind of daily be in front of the American people, be on TV multiple times a week, I think that really feeds his ego. I do not think it's a good idea. It gets to the point of kind of the boy who cries wolf. I would much rather he do at most a weekly briefing, or as is normally the case with someone as in high of a position as the President of the United States, you just do a briefing when it's really needed, because then it makes it special, it makes it important, it makes it interesting. Now, a lot of governors are doing daily briefings, including the governor of Minnesota. I think he's trying to wind off his weekend briefings, but I think that's excessive too, because what it does, it takes the already kind of depleted media resources. You're asking media to also work from home and to stay 6 feet apart. Why put them in front of you, or why make them have to figure out how to cover you 7 days a week or 5 days a week? So I don't think it's smart. I would give him 50-50 on how he's messaging. I would certainly not give him a 10 on the messaging. And he really needs to keep his facts and figures straight before he decides to take it in a public way to the American people.
Now, how about the combativeness with the media? You do have some people in the media who are intentionally being antagonistic, but President Trump also likes to throw shade, so shall we say, at the media a good deal because they get under his skin. They do a lot of things going after him, and I think he also likes the tussle. He finds it fun and he finds it entertaining for viewers. But what do you make of that? Because I do think that if he's doing it every day, these press conferences, and he's getting into spats with the media. I mean, the Wall Street Journal already said this is basically a boring thing for you to keep doing.
Yeah, well, you and I have talked now for many years, definitely since Donald Trump became president. You know that I do not feel he is on any given day very presidential. So tussling with the media does not help his presidential image status. Now, according to our Constitution, which you and I both love, it's never been the job of the media, of the Fourth Estate, to side with politicians or try to make them look good. Do I believe they need to be antagonistic? No. Look, I'm a former TV news reporter, and I never tried to just purposely, for my own ego, try to make someone I was interviewing look bad. But it is actually the media's job, reporters' job, to question government from local to state to federal authorities and protect the rest of us in that way because they've got the pulpit to do it. So I'm never going to criticize media for questioning the president or your governor or senators or mayors because now they are all being put into positions where they're making very big executive orders and unilateral orders, which frankly, I have some questions with civil liberties on many of these orders, but if that's maybe another show. But at the end of the day, if we are being asked to do these things that are taking our civil liberties away, then by all means should the media be questioning the people who are ordering us to do that. I don't want the president to tussle with the media. I don't think the media should be just badgering him, but they do need to keep asking questions.
Now, I actually want to take a couple minutes or final minutes to go on to the civil liberties question because I mentioned and quoted Dr. Fauci a little bit ago talking about the idea of certificates of immunity to coronavirus. When asked on CNN about this earlier today, he said, it's possible, saying that he could imagine a time when people would carry this kind of identification. Quote, it's one of those things that we talk about when we want to make sure that we know who the vulnerable people are and not. This is something that's being discussed. I think it might actually have some merit under certain circumstances. That was earlier on CNN. You are a licensed attorney still in addition to all your consulting work and everything. What do you make of that from a legal standpoint, just on the civil liberties question? I don't like the idea of having to carry around some type of identification that verifies that you're okay to go out and about. That doesn't scream America to me.
Jimmy, it smacks in the face of everything that we believe are our American freedoms. I think it would be terrible if we had to carry around some kind of ID like that. We are already sort of living in that 1984 world that George Orwell predicted many, many years before the year 1984. We're living in that, and you know that I am nonpartisan, but I am about the Constitution and I am about civil liberties. And this is, in my lifetime, this is the worst attack on civil liberties that we've had. The problem is that most Americans aren't viewing it that way, right? Because it's behind the guise of protecting our health and preventing death. I don't want people to die. I don't want this contagion to kill thousands and thousands of people. Right. But we have to remember what this country was built upon, and it requires all of us to remember what that means, but especially the people in position to make law and policy.
One thing that always comes to mind when we're talking about civil liberties being given up for a crisis is Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. The new Emperor Palpatine comes out there and says that he's bringing about the first galactic empire for a safe and secure society. And then Senator Padme Amidala says, so this is how liberty dies, to thunderous applause, as the senators are going crazy. Hundreds of senators who are applauding very vigorously as the new Emperor Palpatine is saying that. I think it's such an important point that we cannot lose who we are as a people. And I have to say, Roshini, as a final point for your response, I'm losing a little bit of faith in Dr. Fauci right now because I think he has been stressing the numbers, the projections that are not meeting up even close. Now, 60,000 deaths of Americans because of this virus is tragic, and it's horrific. But thankfully, it's a lot better than 400,000, which is the number I first heard him talking about.
Right.
He's also talking about getting rid of the handshakes and now having people go around with certificates of immunity. He's losing me here.
Well, he's losing me too, because once we start getting to where we can find multiple Saturday Night Live skits in a week of daily press conferences, we're in a bad place, right? Because then you've just taken away the freedom of millions of Americans who are not able to do their thing, to make a living. Look, I'm a small business owner, Jimmy. Today I was on the phone with my baker looking into the PPP loans. I don't want my business to collapse because of this. It can't go on. And if it goes on because the science types and the health officials were keeping true numbers from us and we're not being transparent, then shame on them and shame on the media for not asking the right questions and challenging these officials sometimes. That's what I would like to see.
Roshini Rajkumar, communications coach, strategist. Check out our website, ownyourwow.com, where you can also find her book, Communicate That. Always enjoy a good conversation with you, Roshini. Happy Easter to you, and thanks so much for taking the time today.
You too, Jimmy, and congrats. The graphics are really looking nice.
Thank you very much. We will have you back soon, I am sure. Roshini Rajkumar, one of our favorite guests to have on the airwaves or the internet, however it may be, joining us here on Jimmy at the Crossroads. No.